Hey there, fellow deep divers. You guys shared this article with us about Queen Elizabeth and Margaret Thatcher, and well, we're really diving into it. The real story behind their clash over apartheid in South Africa.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Juicy.
it's a fascinating blend of history, politics, and a bit of royal drama, too. Straight out of Season 4 of The Crown. Our source today is this article from Town & Country magazine. It's titled, "The Queen Really Did Condemn Margaret Thatcher's Position Over Apartheid Sanctions in South Africa." Now, if you're new here and you want to stay up to date on all our deep dives, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit that notification bell. So for those who need like a quick refresher, apartheid, it was a brutal system of racial segregation and discrimination that was enforced in South Africa by the 1980s. The world was demanding change. And the Commonwealth, that group of nations with historical ties to Britain, they were a key player. Can you paint a picture of the political climate surrounding South Africa at that time?
Oh, absolutely. It was a real pressure cooker. The international community was increasingly united in its condemnation of apartheid. The Commonwealth in particular, they were pushing for a program of economic sanctions against the South African government to force them to dismantle this inhumane system.
And it's here where things get really intriguing. The article highlights this almost unbelievable fact. 48 out of 49 Commonwealth nations agreed on sanctions.
Right.
And Britain was the only holdout.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Margaret Thatcher, the prime minister at the time, became kind of a lightning rod for all the criticism. But it's important to note, even Thatcher condemned apartheid itself. So what was driving her resistance to these sanctions?
Okay, so Thatcher's opposition was complex. On one hand, she was a staunch advocate for free trade and viewed sanctions as a form of economic warfare that could ultimately hurt Britain more than South Africa.
Interesting.
Some historians believe that she was also concerned about the impact on British jobs, particularly those tied to investments in South African mining. It's also worth noting that she might have been applying pressure behind the scenes, pushing for gradual reform in South Africa through dialogue rather than immediate economic punishment.
Oh, okay.
Interestingly, her stance mirrored that of President Reagan in the U.S., who also opposed sanctions.
So we have this international pressure cooker, with Thatcher standing firm despite the near universal condemnation of apartheid. Now, let's bring Queen Elizabeth into the picture. She wasn't just the monarch of Britain, but also the head of this Commonwealth. That's grappling with such a critical moral issue. How did Thatcher's stance impact the Queen's role and the very future of the Commonwealth itself?
Oh, that's a great question. Imagine being the Queen leading this group of nations, largely unified on such a critical issue, and then your own prime minister representing your country is the sole dissenter. Wow, that's not just a political disagreement, it's a blow to the Queen's authority within the Commonwealth and potentially threatens its unity. Declassified documents revealed just how worried she was about the situation. It wasn't simply about disagreeing with Thatcher. It was about the ramifications for the entire Commonwealth.
And the situation becomes even more dramatic. Because according to these documents, the Queen was so upset, she considered canceling her weekly meeting with Thatcher. Now, she didn't actually cancel it, but she did take a different, rather bold course of action. What was it?
This is where the Sunday Times article comes in. It was a real bombshell. It didn't directly quote the Queen, which would have been unprecedented, but it did claim that she was dismayed by Thatcher's perceived lack of compassion for South Africans suffering under apartheid.
Right.
The article cited an anonymous palace source, hinting that someone within the Queen's inner circle was intentionally leaking this information.
Talk about palace intrigue. It's like something straight out of The Crown. And in a way, it is. They actually got this detail right. The source was Michael Shea, the Palace press secretary. What happened to him after this article exploded onto the scene?
Well, Shea resigned soon after, though it's unclear if he was forced out or left on his own terms. The real mystery is whether he acted alone or had some degree of approval from higher up. Did someone, maybe even the Queen herself, orchestrate this leak to pressure Thatcher?
Ooh.
It's a question that continues to fascinate historians.
This whole situation is a high-stakes drama, playing out on both the world stage and within the British government. Now, The Crown takes some creative liberties, especially in portraying these tense confrontations between the Queen and Thatcher. The show depicts this ongoing feud. But what really happened after the article was published?
Well, what's really interesting is that the Queen ended up apologizing to Thatcher. Apparently, Thatcher was quite hurt by the accusation that she lacked compassion, and the Queen, realizing the potential damage this public rebuke had caused, felt she needed to smooth things over.
So much for the ongoing feud the Crown portrays. That apology really throws a wrench in things. It makes you think about the internal struggle the Queen must have been going through, that sense of moral obligation to stand against apartheid, the need to protect the Commonwealth's unity, and yet the responsibility to maintain that delicate balance with her Prime Minister. On the surface, it seems like Thatcher ultimately won. The Queen apologized, sanctions weren't imposed, and Thatcher seemingly got her way. But is it really that straightforward? What's your take?
That's where it gets fascinating. Despite the apology, the damage was already done. The Sunday Times article had triggered a global media frenzy. The Queen's dismay was out there, putting immense pressure on Thatcher and highlighting the growing division between Britain and the rest of the Commonwealth.
It's like a silent protest, isn't it? The Queen can't openly criticize her own Prime Minister, but she can make her displeasure known in other ways. And when the Queen expresses disapproval, the whole world listens.
Exactly. It really demonstrates the power of the Queen's soft power. She doesn't need to make grand pronouncements or issue decrees. Her opinions, even when expressed indirectly, carry enormous weight. In a way, this incident could even be seen as a strategic move. She knew she couldn't force Thatcher to change course, but she could leverage her influence to sway public opinion and apply pressure from a different angle.
That's fascinating. It suggests that sometimes subtle actions can be more effective than outright confrontation. And it adds this layer of intrigue, because we may never fully know the extent of the Queen's involvement in that leak, but it definitely raises questions. It also brings up a really important question about the role of the monarch in a modern democracy. Is it appropriate for the Queen to express her personal views on political matters, even if it's done indirectly? Or should she remain strictly neutral, as a symbol of national unity, rather than a political player?
It's a delicate balance, isn't it? Especially in a situation with such high moral stakes. You can understand why the Queen felt compelled to act, even if it meant pushing the boundaries of her traditional role.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that this wasn't solely about apartheid. It was also about safeguarding the future of the Commonwealth itself. The Queen clearly perceived Thatcher's stance as a threat to its unity and stability, an organization deeply important to her.
Right. Thatcher's Britain First approach clashed with the Queen's vision of a cooperative and interconnected Commonwealth. It was a collision of two fundamentally different worldviews.
And what was the lasting impact of this clash?
Well, the fallout reverberated for years. It strained relations between Britain and many Commonwealth nations, and raised serious questions about Thatcher's leadership and her ability to represent the interests of the entire nation, not just her own political ideology.
So while Thatcher might have won this particular round, the long-term repercussions were far more complex and nuanced.
Precisely. This incident serves as a reminder that even within a system with a clear hierarchy of power, there are other forms of influence at play. The Queen's actions, even though they were ultimately retracted, sent a potent message that resonated far beyond Buckingham Palace.
It reminds us that sometimes the most impactful events are the ones that happen behind closed doors. In the subtle maneuvering and whispered conversations, it makes you wonder what other instances like this have occurred throughout history that we may never fully uncover.
That's the allure of history, isn't it? There are always layers to peel back, hidden motivations to examine, and multiple perspectives to consider. And often, the seemingly smallest details can reveal profound truths about individuals and the forces shaping our world.
It underscores that history isn't just a collection of dates and events. It's a tapestry woven with human drama, personal convictions, and strategic calculations. And sometimes, to truly understand the past, we need to delve beyond the official narratives and look into those whispers and shadows. We've examined the historical context of apartheid, the political strategies at play, and the personal drama behind the Queen's clash with Thatcher. We've seen how a seemingly straightforward disagreement can unravel into a web of intrigue, raising questions about power, influence, and the role of the monarchy in the modern world.
It certainly does. And it leaves us with a question that remains relevant today. What is the proper role of a monarch in a democratic society? Should they be a silent figurehead? Or do they have a responsibility to speak out on moral issues, even when it means challenging their own government?
It's a tough question, isn't it? Because on the one hand, we want the monarch to be above the political fray, a symbol of unity for everyone. But on the other hand, they are human beings with their own conscience and sense of morality, Can they truly remain silent in the face of injustice?
And it's even more complicated when you consider the Queen's personal history. She came of age during World War II, a time when the monarchy played a vital role in rallying the nation against fascism. That experience likely shaped her perspective on the limits of royal intervention.
That's a great point. It's like she carries that wartime legacy with her, a sense of duty to speak out against tyranny, even if it means ruffling some feathers. It makes you wonder, what would have happened if she hadn't acted? Even in this indirect way, would Thatcher have eventually come around on the sanctions issue? Or would Britain have remained isolated, its reputation tarnished by this association with apartheid?
It's impossible to know for sure.